So last time we had a look at how PMI looks towards the PMI in terms of skills, strategic goals, and leadership balancing in terms of helping the complete team to reach their end goal, reach their project objectives, right? And that's the crux of the overall the project management processes is required. Now let's start trying to understand or trying to review 10 knowledge area in terms of project management. And we might have discussed a lot on project life cycle in terms of which type of project methodology to follow, what type of generic phases we normally incur within the project management. And yes, there are a good number of questions on, tell me about difference between waterfall and agile and these type of questions. So we need to prepare for such scenario. Whenever the most prominent difference between waterfall and agile is waterfall is a sequential, agile is a kind of iterative. Waterfall is mostly the oldest project management methodology we started with compartmentalizing the overall processes so that they don't overlap each other, because there was lots of indiscipline whenever we actually started managing the projects in terms of disciplining the resources, like we are at this phase and then let's not do other things and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of a kid learning how to get the project up on track, right? And then when we come to iterative project management processes, there we reached a maturity stage where we know what all different phases, how can we help the customer in terms of flexibility, in terms of iterativeness, and so on and so forth. And then we analyze a lot in terms of how these projects can be stabilized, successful, and all those things. So we came with something called Agile Scrum. So Agile Scrum is one of the most, I'll repeat, one of the most mature project management methodology as of now. And that's why many choose to go with the Agile Scrum. Within Agile Scrum, we have everything discipline, starting from a templatization to a disciplining a typical meeting called daily Scrum meet review, and trying to understand what type of artifacts, bare minimum documentation, and more of result orientedness or collaborativeness, flexibility within the project management processes, so that the client is happy. The party who is basically financing the project is the most happiest person, and that's how we tuned out all the management processes towards towards that party. And that's how even the client likes Agile Scrum, and they believe everybody should go on with the Agile Scrum. But yes, at a ground level, there could be many different challenges, because we had good number of managers registering these flexibility thing. And then we got a medium saying, okay, during a sprint, let's try to stabilize the sprint as much as possible, rather than changing the work items, activity list, or the task at hand quite frequently. And that's the thought process right now, where we do daily meeting to understand the priority change, scenario change, or adoption to the client for whatever change in the overall project, product, solution, support, services kind of scenario. But still, at heart, we normally suggest that a sprint development is stabilized. So we have a kind of requirement, rather than frozen, we use word called stabilize. So in extreme scenario, we do adopt any changes within the sprint as well. But normally, for a practical reasons, we do kind of stabilize requirement, or we have a fixed list of requirement where we execute that sprint. Okay, so this way we have this iterative sprint, having the length of 3 days to max 4 weeks, depending upon your complexity of the project, the client support or client demands, and all such things during that time. So here, at most, value or the principles are basically flexibility, iterativeness, and collaborative work. So these things, if you can pronounce within the interview, that's more than enough for actually the project management methodology or life cycle discussions, right? Naming of the waterfall stages also can be challenging sometimes, because some project managers might just call requirement gathering, designing, development, testing, and deployment. Some might go into quite good amount of depth, saying first is basically initiation in terms of business analyst requirement gathering. Then they go to the level of elaboration of a requirement, elicitation of a requirement, Then we go to a phase of design. Then we have a development and a testing in some sort of testing in parallel, even during the waterfall. Then we go to bundling of these releases, releasing actually on the test server, production server, and so on and so forth. And then we have a deployment scenario, and that's how a complete detailed discussion of waterfall can be given. But again, depending upon the interviewer, we need to basically work with him to get that obstacle clear. Think of an interview as an obstacle. I'll keep repeating this phase because this will give you an added advantage to look at the thing in a quite stressless manner. Okay, don't overdo anything. What I would really suggest, jot down some note, write down some script where we know what to speak, what not to speak, because a proactive study always helps, right? And if you write down the script, you know what type of words or what type of detailings for a particular word I can give and where I have to stop. Um, and the information, I don't want to, give too much information because that can create contradictions. Okay, when you discuss, like I said, the waterfall phases in depth, then the interviewer might get baffled. Man, this is the old methodology, and this guy is talking about phases like analysis, phases like running parallel scenarios, and all those things. So that's kind of contradiction with his thoughts, with his or her thoughts. And so normally try to explain in the least possible word, slowly, steadily, so that the other person, can understand you're saying and he can give the suggestion. Please look out for the suggestion, whatever the interview is giving, because and just flow around with him rather than trying to portray your knowledge left and right. Okay. Our thought process is to gain a trust of the interviewer. Try to impress in a least possible scenario rather than being a know-it-all type of guy. Okay, so there's also kind of what you can say, good balance or a kind of good median in between, trying to be a better support system rather than a geeky fellow or a fellow who can do it all, but yes, still looking for a job kind of scenario. Okay, so there we need to understand how the interviewer being is looking at you, and how you need to in his thought process gain a chair of, okay, this guy can do a work for us, as simple as that. Okay, so try to prepare in that direction. As far as the project life cycle in the PMI thought process, we have something called pre-project work. So we normally do assessment with sell people. We build a business case, try to arrange something like benefits management plan for a given product, solution, support services. Then we start with something called project charter. So in a project charter, we normally work with that client in terms of gaining something called work order, SOW. SOW is statement of work, or a contract signed for a particular project. Then we start organizing and preparing for a project. This is a kind of planning phase, which PMI, do understand. In planning phase, we normally gather the requirement, change our plan, we build a good strategic plan, long-term plan for the given requirement. And then we also, plan some phases, some sprint, some iteration. If that's the scenario in waterfall, we just plan the phases like requirement gathering, designing, development, testing, and deployment. Then we normally carry out the development, and then after development, we might have a testing, or we might do testing parallelly, because this is a kind of hybrid version of waterfall, which is normally used in the industry. So design, development, and testing can go parallel. At the end of that phase, we have a completely tested, okay, products to be delivered, wrapped, released. If it's a physical product, if it's a tangible or intangible product, we do release on a logical server, or hand it over the product to the customer, best possible fashion to gain maximum sort of satisfaction out of it. Okay, and then depending upon the contractual terms, we might have a warranty, support, or training plans as per the client needs. And that's how that's what we call a flexibility embedded in the waterfall nowadays, just to make sure the project is a success. We normally adopt a waterfall project for the requirements having already frozen, or requirements have been gathered in R&D fashion. So normally all these product developments, they do get executed in a waterfall way. Even US military or NASA, they use waterfall for a situation where you have really concrete or fixed set of requirement, and then they need to just execute it in a most disciplined fashion. So yes, waterfall is much more disciplined than agile because it normally gives you a very little time for a flexible scenario. In some cases, like if you're doing project internally, you don't need that much flexibility. So you normally go ahead with the waterfall. In case you are doing something like products where I have completely gathered the requirement or analyzed the requirement or researched the requirement, and then they are not going to change because I'm not going to run research parallel of a product development. Okay. Think of a scenario. Steve Jobs is preparing to develop his first iPhone. So he had a thought process, right? And he have evolved a thought process to create a phone which is for a particular strata of rich people. Create a good phone, or rather the best technological advanced phone, which can be priced at a higher range than the normal phone available. He was not trying to sell iPhone to the masses. That idea came later on, and then most probably I think from version 6 on, they have reduced the price, okay, just to basically gain the overall population, gain the overall market capture in quite a different regions of the world, specifically the third world countries and all. Okay, so that way, if you have a really good product understanding, research and development already done, you normally don't change those requirements. In such scenario, we might follow the waterfall. But normally, Agile Scrum is maximum, applied for almost more than 80-85% of the projects all over the globe, specifically in North America and Canadian market, where we have a mature project management services as we speak during the globe throughout the earth. Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
No, sir.
Yeah, good, right? I know this tends to get monotonous, but yes, it's a kind of review. So that's why, it's a bit, please do ask question if you feel, there are some confusion, contradiction to your thought process and all. Okay. And again, there's no right or wrong in terms of management. We normally do the things at as what it needs at that time. We might do change, like depending upon the client request or depending upon the top management guidance, we do change policies, procedures, quality management process at that time, right? So normally, as a manager, as a what I can say, good project manager, I normally try to align myself with all the possible changes around my surroundings, be it something like client request, be it something like top management initiative, and so on and so forth. And that's the kind of most of the works goes in. Okay, like let's say a simple example of COVID hitting the overall market, right? This is was in a March during I think 2019. There, or rather 2020, I believe, right? Yeah, 2020, where we basically started working remotely left and right, and this was a kind of decision implemented by the federal or state government on various software development houses. And well, we are the most digitally advanced development house. So in that scenario, we are quite prepared for such thing. And it was not much of a, kind of learning or changes we do, but we have to spend some good amount of time in stabilizing the remote work, the coordinations, the online meetings, the efficiency of the development and all those things, right? So there we take a bit of hit whenever we basically shifted in a distributed working environment or remote working environment at that time. And then we got adapted to it. We developed some new tools. We tweaked our tools in such a way that we do coordinate extensively in terms of those scrum meets and all those things. I know a couple of organizations who have started taking 2 scrum meet, one in the morning, one in the evening, so as to make sure to reassess where we stand and update the PMIs accordingly. So like that, our industry is the most flexible in terms of software industry or software development industry. project product solution development industry, where we normally get adopted to the latest tools and technology quite efficiently with the best possible opening hands and all those things, right? So we do adopt the to the new technologies, new challenges in a welcoming fashion. But still, there are normally a kind of detrimental effect on efficiencies, the deliveries or the planning, because normally whenever you include such scenarios within your day-to-day work, there could be some disturbances or delays in terms of deploying, creating such scenarios, right? And that's why we need to understand from a perspective how this management is going to get implemented on the ground. And believe me, as I normally speak, management is an artwork. We are controlling the things which we normally couldn't count. And that's why we need to understand management is an artwork. There is a science attached to it, or we have adopted a scientific approach to this art. And that's what this Agile Scrum all about, the waterfall, the different methodologies like ITISM, Six Sigma, and the whole 9 yards of it. So that's why we trying to execute this artwork as a project manager to get the things working, to get the results out as expected, to build the product as expected, depending upon the feature list and the look and feel, the usability of it, and so on and so forth. So that's why the manager is a kind of overall artist who is painting this picture. Look it from that angle. And for that, the PMP Institute, the PMI Institute have came up with a kind of 10 knowledge area. And this is what we basically were discussing in our last session. So with this 10 knowledge area and 49 process, we try to address this art in a scientific manner. And here we are trying to understand the whole process in the input, processing, and output differentiation or segregation in terms of how we're going to manage this art. Okay. In normal scenario, we normally do it like this first project knowledge area, as we call it, knowledge area, project integration management. And here we have 7 process group. And there are we categorize these 7 process group among we have categorized the 7 processes among 5 process group. One group is initiating process group, second group is planning process group, third process is executing process group, and fourth process is monitoring and controlling process group, and the last process is closing process group. So these type of processes are categorized or grouped into these various process categories, and we have normally 10 knowledge area. So as the overall 10 chapters in the PM book, which we normally refer as a Bible to project management discipline, if you go by the PMI PMP way. Here we can use waterfall or agile or any other project management methodology, but as we know, maximum industry use agile scrum. So these processes have been tweaked. I'm not saying customized, it's basically tweaked to fit agile scrum. So it includes some sort of flexibility, some sort of the matured processes in terms of obtaining the best possible quality even on the run. So we do strive for better efficiency, better efficacy, and better speeds to achieve result as and when it's possible. And even we normally stress on something called managed project knowledge. So what do you mean by managed project knowledge process here? We try to archive project knowledge wherever we feel that we have done something new and which is giving us a better result. So this is like kind of sharing the knowledge of the best practices across the organization. And if you do it religiously, your organization can be one of the most matured project management organizations or matured processes adaptive organizations. So they do whatever they do in the most possible efficient manner. Okay. Now let me take you to an Excel sheet rather than a presentation where I have included all these 10 project knowledge areas and the different process group with it. Okay. And I'll share this Excel sheet with you just for references. Now here on the leftmost column, we have the knowledge areas. There are total 10 knowledge areas. These 4, 5 numbers in the braces refers to a chapter in the PM book, project management book of knowledge. version 6. Okay, as we were discussing, the first knowledge area is project integration management. Here we normally execute 7 processes with 5 process groups. Okay, in the first initiating process group, we normally start with a develop project charter. The project charter is a document based on a statement of work, work order, or a contract or agreement done with your client, done with your stakeholder. And from there we build some project charter where we normally try to include all the main project objective we are agreed upon. So here we start building an umbrella plans in terms of project integration management. Okay. So the first plan we build is develop project management plan. This is a kind of Word document or an Excel sheet or a Microsoft project plan where we normally try to understand what needs to be done or how we can disintegrate the work from the charter. Let's say in charter, if you have included a work called develop a road of, let's say, a kilometer or a mile, right? So we need to develop a concrete road or a tar road of a mile. Then in my project management plan, I normally disintegrate this whole project objective into smaller part or work item or activities. And here I might, define these activities as preparing the ground, hardening the ground, applying whatever, the layer of sand or the boulders I need to apply, then preparing the tar or the cement, whatever I need to apply to the surface. Make sure it's flexible and hard enough for the types of vehicle you are carrying. So the road or the basic tar or the cement road are different whenever you do something like aeroplane road or and they are different whenever you do for light roads. Light roads can be of paver blocks like used for walking, cycling, and blah blah things. But otherwise, the other roads are normally smooth, which normally don't give any jerks to your vehicle, be it a car, bike, or a truck or whatnot. And that way we normally disintegrate all the activities need to be done to basically pave the road, right? You can take an example of basically developing a building, developing a single story house also. Okay, we normally take the example of developing a 2-story house, and we try to disintegrate these development activities into a work item which are normally aligned for a person not more than 6 hours. Okay, 6 hours is basically our limit of planning an activity for a given person so that it can be done in a day, can be traced out progressively day after day, whenever we normally discuss the progress, when we normally take a stock of where we stand on a given day. In executing process group, we have a direct and managed project work and manage project knowledge. Now, I have marked these as in red because these are the points, these are the process group where you normally get the interview question mostly. Okay, so direct and managed project was, don't have too much interview question, but managed project knowledge. So the interviewer might ask you, how do we have managed the project knowledge? So you need to explain in 2 things primarily. One is managing or archiving the knowledge, and second is basically adaptation to the best practices. Okay, so first thing first, you have to archive knowledge, whatever you tried, new things, and whatever you are basically sharing within your organization so that other can also benefit from it. And this also includes, you can choose the processes, policies, procedure, rule book, quality processes, which are basically proven efficient in other similar projects. And that's also kind of part and parcel of managed project knowledge. And the the other third entity is basically, as we discussed, the best practices adoption. What are the best practices? There are best practices, noted or are denoted for each and every best practices in terms of gathering the knowledge, like gathering requirement, gathering or designing a project, developing a code, testing practices, validation verification practices, deployment practices, and there are warranty practices, and so on and so forth. So all these practices have a best, best best practices which have learned by the organizations during its tenure from its inception, right? So for that matter, we tend to use the best practices to make your life easy, make your life more efficient, make your life less problematic, make the whole thing more qualitative one way or the another. Okay, so this way we normally adopt to the best practice with a managed project knowledge type of process group. So we learn all sort of things which we have to do in the managed project knowledge process group. Then we have monitoring and controlling process group where we have a monitor and control project work. This is again an umbrella activity. How are we going to monitor the project work? What all a system like PMIS is going to help us in the long run? So how do you monitor? So what do you do in monitoring? You normally monitor the project plan and the respective progress on a daily basis, if not hourly. And this is how I'll make sure I'm not deviated from the plan. I'm not deviated from the strategies already, what you can say, built, prepared, planned for a given executions. And then we control the project work in a manner, we try to gauge, we try to estimate, we try to actually calculate certain numbers as we discussed in our last session. These numbers can be net project value, earn value management, and quite a few numbers of such formulas we adopt to make sure we can control the project in a numeric calculative way. And perform integrated change control talks about integrating whatever you build over the time. We try to bundle it together effectively, qualitatively, so that we can plan the deliveries accordingly. And then in terms of closing process group, we try to understand how do we close the project, or whenever you complete the things, developing, how do you shift the control to a support service team, and then you can basically go on for the next project. This is the normal life. This is the normal cycle will adopt. And that's way there are development project managers, there are support project manager, there are services project manager. Okay, all these have different priorities to them, as we have seen in a video where we normally think about how a project management different from a service management. Project management talks about the basic policies and processes for constructing a thing. Service management talk about a supporting of such scenario. How do you make sure the user is using that product with the best possible efficacy, best possible utilization of knowledge, and so on and so forth. So that's why. Another major important thing in close project is basically in case of failure, we don't normally call it failure, we call it as a knowledge gaining project. And that's a kind of positive way to look at the project, even if it's a failure. We do gather the knowledge as we talked about the project knowledge management knowledge area, where we try to collect what have we missed, what have gone wrong, and that way we can build the better practices next time. We normally, in a normal session, took almost 1 to 2 sessions for each knowledge area. Okay, but here as we are revising, I'm going at a pace where we can understand the criticalness, we can understand these points for an interviewing perspective. Okay, first integration management knowledge area, second knowledge management, second is basically project scope management area. As the name suggests, we normally try to finalize a scope. Now, what do you mean by finalize the scope? We are not limiting the scope, but we are finalizing the scope. What we are deciding, what are the main objective of this project, product, services development, or solution development for that matter. So what we do, we try to align our project in that direction. If you find the scope is deviating from the crux, deviating from the main strategic idea, we might create another project by itself, saying okay, rather than building attendance management solution, we can also build the parking management solution, or we can also build a project for infrastructure management solution within the attendance management solution as well. So this way a singular project manager can be migrated to a program manager. So that's why scope management is one of the most important knowledge area within the project management space, where you decide which is in scope and out scope. In scope is whatever is aligned with your project goal, as we discussed about a temporary endeavor to achieve a unique result or a goal or a product, right? That's what we're talking about here. If the project is aligned in that direction, a singular aim direction, then yeah, okay. If it's too much deviation from that strategic goal, we might instantiate another project plan. And so we might have another project execution in place, and the project manager can be migrated to a program manager because of this organic bifurcation. And that's why now you have two babies to manage, two projects to manage in a given day. And that's why you can be labeled as a senior project manager or a program manager. Here, there are around 6 processes we have included in the project scope management, plan scope management. So we normally build a plan how to manage that scope. So are we going to use the tools like Microsoft Project, Excel, and whatnot, or are we going to use Jira and other tools? So we decide on the tools. Then we basically try to apply validation of a requirement rather than collect requirement. Okay, so here the project management team normally reviews and understands or retrieve the knowledge of the requirements from the analyst team nowadays. Okay, so we don't go on collecting requirement, but we do validate the requirement. We validate the understanding of the requirement so that we can basically build a defined scope document where we normally align all the scopes in a way that we understand this is the core scope, and then these are the subsidiary scope or a supporting or a collaborative scopes to that scope. And that's how we normally jot down a kind of hierarchy-based scope diagram. We might refer to it as a work breakdown structure, activity breakdown structure, or work item breakdown structure, depending upon your organizational policies and processes where you working. So here, what we do, we break down or disintegrate the work item to a level where we normally have the last layer of a work down of less than 6 hours of effort required for each of these work item, activity breakdown, and all these things, right? So here what we do, we are trying to understand how we can micromanage the project in terms of each and every work item and how they will basically consume the efforts of a given resources. And then in terms of monitoring and controlling, these are the continuous processes where we have a validate scope process going on throughout each and every sprint. The control scope goes on each and every sprint, and these you can correctly correlate to the sprint retrospective and sprint strategic planning. Okay, so this way we basically control the scope. We basically enhance, validate, and control the scope throughout our project with these validate scope and control scope process flow. So this is about the project scope management. Does anybody have any question for me at this moment?
The project scope management is it about the change management?
Yes, sir. It's also includes change management.
Okay.
Very right to say. And as we discussed, right, just few minutes ago, normally the flexibility, the collaboration works normally not within the sprint, but one sprint to another sprint, and that's how we manage it. Okay, but normally if you have a bigger sprint, like more than a week sprint, then you have to include certain changes even during the sprint, and that destabilize the whole thing, because then again you need to validate scenario and priority within your sprint, and that's way kind of disturbing for the developer and the tester as well. So for that matter, we build a shorter sprint so that we can manage the change in a better sprint to sprint rather than within the sprint manner. Could you understand, sir, what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why the flexibility is there, but we try to even manage our work for a given stability of requirement. We don't call requirement frozen. We call it stabilization of a requirement. These words do matter whenever you speak in your interview, because that's how the interviewer will know, yes, this is really a seasoned project manager. And that's how we want to portray in a given interview. Okay. Then we move to the next knowledge area called project schedule management knowledge area. Now here, whatever scope we have developed, we attach a schedule to it. So whenever I say I want to build a 2-story house, I want to build a attendance management solution enhancement for a given client, I might start planning this activity one after the other with the sequence, with the resource, with the priority, scenario, and dependency aligned within this schedule. So how do I do it? I normally start with the first entity. Okay, try to understand what the users want in terms of attendance. Do they prefer biometric? Do they prefer, you know, iris scanner, or whatever other way available at that time? Now here, um, the most important thing here nowadays, we go with the user story. Now, what is a user story? User story is a kind of requirement written in a way what needs to be done for which of the users and how the user perceives it, what the user thinks this functionality should do for him or her. And that's how you build user stories. Now, these user stories are a kind of requirement in a story-like fashion. And that's why we normally use this user story and take it as a constructive idea for the development team, one after the other. We plan it sequentially depending upon number of users. Within a given sprint, I have so much task plan. So if I have a 6 development resources, I'll plan 6 different developing of a user story, depending upon the estimation of small, medium, big, or you can have a number of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, depending upon the weight of a user story or the time taken to be developed that user story. I normally categorized it among the long, short, all those different categorization and plan it accordingly. So in a given day, a developer can complete 2 or 3 stories also if they are shorts. If they are big, you might have just 1 story going on for the 6 hours. Now I try to disintegrate this work item, as I already discussed, to a level where I can plan everything within 6 hours time. So the longest possible story can be 6 hour time of the development. And this is again a thumb rule. There could be a story who might take a week or might be carried forward to the next sprint as well. So there are some exception scenario, but normally the way I create schedule is basically plan these activities, work item to be completed within the 6 hours. Now let's try to understand from a planning, from the process group perspective. In planning process group under schedule management, I have 5 processes. So scheduling is all about planning. And then in monitoring and controlling, I have one control schedule type of processes. Let's talk about these first 5 processes which are in a planning process group. So what I do, I plan the schedule management in terms of which tool I'm going to use, Microsoft Project, Excel, Jira, Primavera, and there are dime a dozen available. Depending upon your organizational policy processes choice, you normally go ahead with the project planning tool. And here I include or I apply a schedule to the scope which I have developed earlier. And here I define this activity. So what do you mean by getting the groundwork done for a given building? It's not as simple as groundwork done. You need to dig the earth, you need to plan the digging, you need to understand the depth, length, breadth, width, and the preparation of a ground and all such scenarios. So there are a good number of domain knowledge required here as far as the schedule management goes, because we are trying to do estimation. We are trying to do activity duration estimation so that how much a resource X will take to get this work done. And as we say, the maximum I plan for a 6 month. So I need to disintegrate the activity like, prepare the ground for a building, might be disintegrated into 16 or 20 different tasks. And each task can be not more than 6 hours of work. That's a thumb rule we follow. Okay. So we defined activity, we sequence activity, we keep estimating activity, and then we develop a schedule. So my schedule will have Ravindra will basically review the ground for its softness. Okay, that can be first step, which can be completed in 3 hours. Then Pooja will go there and try to understand how much depth we need to dig the earth to make sure the building is steady, depending upon the height of house, height of building, and all those things. So more you dig, the building will be more stable in terms of tornado and all those things, right? So for that matter, we have to normally, there's a thumb rule in this construction building industry where you have to dig so much earth for a so tall house and so on and so forth. So they normally apply those scenarios. So Pooja might build a plan of digging the earth of around 10 feet for a two-story house, and so on and so forth. So we normally plan these activities and also give a schedule attached to it, so that for Pooja, I have normally kept 4 hours. So Ravindra and Pooja, they work together to basically understanding how much groundwork we need to do for this two-story house. And that's how I start building the schedule. Now here, control schedule means I do review the schedule upon depending upon the priorities and scenario changes, addition, subtraction to the task list, work item list by the client as well as various stakeholders. So for this, the control schedule is most important activity or a processes we do throughout our project management life. And this is the actual artwork we are talking about. As a manager, I need to design, I need to understand, I'm in a full charge of this project plan. And that's how I normally make sure the project run most efficient, in an effective manner with the given resources. And yes, there are always shortages of resources in terms of the skill required, in terms of health challenges and a whole 9 yards of it. And that's how we still couldn't automate the project management processes from good number of centuries altogether. And that's why project managers are really a kind of critical resources for any given development. Okay. And this way, I keep building project plan, keep building my artwork, keep developing that project solution support services as per the strategic plan for a long run. And this is what I do in a control schedule process flow. Does that make sense to you? Anybody have any question, confusion for me?
Yeah,
Am I
yeah, it's good.
We are good, right? Yeah. And this is a kind of good quick revision. Believe me, I'm going to also name this, release this on YouTube and name this as a quick knowledge area revision. Might be part 1 and then we have part 2 with the remaining process group also. Okay. So let's move on to the next process group called project cost management. Now, as we discussed in the 6th knowledge area, project schedule management, where I normally attach a resource or these activity are estimated for a particular resource. Resource can be man, material, machine. Mostly talk about the man part of it. So whenever I assign a resource to a schedule, I normally deduced a cost for a given task work item. Depending upon the resources I use, I normally can deduce a cost. So here we are trying to reduce the cost, and here we are basically trying to finalize the project plan in terms of developing the project for a long-term duration, might be 3 months, 4 months, 5 years, and so on and so forth. So here now we are basically deducing the cost from the integration, scope, and a schedule management. In the project cost management, I have 4 processes. 3 in the planning, 1 in the controlling group, monitoring and controlling group. So let's start with the planning group. In the planning group, I normally do a plan cost management in terms of an umbrella activity, how much revenue I have at my disposal, so how senior resources I can get, how many senior, how many junior, and so on and so forth. Now here, there's a thought process of organizational cost disbursement. Now, this refers to how the project will get revenue in terms of spending, in terms of basically, or how the cost figures are being applied to a given resource, be it a human resource. Normally, humans get paid on a monthly basis. An asset get acquired at once at the start. And normally, there are some operational costs, other operational costs, like the instruments, the tools, and the techniques, and a whole 9 yards required for completing that project. So here, and to build an a uniform practice throughout the project to understand what type of revenue dispersal mechanism I'm using. Is it like one time? Is it like gradual? Mostly people go with the gradual. So you have some revenue disbursed to a project manager's um, book of accounts to start a project. Then within the next month, another installment. Then next month, next week, another installment, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so we normally build this strategy in a plan schedule management, in define activities, in plan cost management. And then in next process, we estimate the cost, or rather we validate cost. We keep validating cost to make sure the project has to be completed in least possible cost, best possible efficiencies. And so we normally try and test to use the least possible cost with the best possible resources available within your organization pool. Now, these resources means man, material, machine. The more in quite a few cases, the more economical resources means the quality can be degraded. And these kind of thumb rules also applies to this whole estimate cost management. Here, what we are trying to do, we are trying to achieve the least possible cost with the best possible efficiency. Now, here I want to understand how each and every project manager can paint his or her artwork in terms of planning strategically. Everybody wants senior resources or optimally skilled resources. But still, at the ground, you might, want Bill Gates of the world, but you need to basically go ahead with the local salespersons available at your fingertip. And that's how you normally get the project done. So there is always a kind of push and pull in terms of cost applying and the resource seniority or the quality of resources you can have at your disposal. Then we also keep determining the budget in terms of trend analysis from the previous spending and how much I'm going to do in terms of the next months, next weeks, next sprint, and so on and so forth. So that I extrapolate the cost consumption in terms of determining the budget at actuals with the practical trends, with the actual ground trend, so that I know if I'm over budgeted, I've spent too much money, I've spent a kind of
Yeah.
not so, I'm not good at spending and so on and so forth. So this development determining budget is a kind of processes where I try to determine how to basically utilize the spending given to me, the budget given to me by the management for a given project, development, solution, or support services. Okay, and then the last the most important thing, which is a kind of monitoring and controlling process group, a process called control cost. So I keep controlling cost for every strata, every step of the project, and this is what the management review. This is what the daily project review for a project manager, which is a kind of internal project, processes only done by the project manager with the help of some assistant project manager or the project lead or the group lead, whatever you have role associated with the team. You normally review your cost and adopt a new changes to the cost mechanism in the control cost project management knowledge area. Okay, and this is how we keep controlling costs throughout our project. Does it make sense? Anybody have any confusion, contradiction to these thought processes? I'll take it as no one has any questions right now. So for first,
Sir. Yeah, good, sir.
thank you, sir. So here we have a total covered first 4 knowledge area, which is a kind of base project management, what we used to do, but now we have labeled with the specific processes, policies, and a rule book, right? Now, when you move to the next project knowledge management area called project quality management area, here we just have 3 processes. One is plan quality management, manage quality, and control quality. But one of them is a kind of round, right? So let me, dwell on that. First, let's try to understand what quality management does. This quality management knowledge area have been introduced in the management just to make sure we maintain our quality and we don't degrade our quality in the name of cost or the schedule. Now, as we discussed, there's something called golden triangle. So what is a golden triangle? Cost, schedule, and quality. Either you change, either of them, if change, can affect the other two. So if you try to improve quality too much, there's a burden on cost, budgeting, and the schedule. If you try to extend the schedule, the cost will get extended. If you try to extend the, if you try to reduce the cost too much, then there is an effect on quality directly and indirect effect on schedule as well. So that's way this golden triangle has to be managed within this knowledge area called project quality management. And as we know, we normally have strict quality policies or processes and rule frameworks for a given organization. And there are some standard templates like CMMI, ISO, ITISM, and so on and so forth. So we normally adopt to one of the quality framework and normally execute the project accordingly. In case of software or the educational institute or basically many auto ancillary many auto ancillary companies, we normally choose the CMMI policy, quality framework. There are a number of institutions who choose the ISO framework as well. Now, the adoption to the framework, we normally customize this framework fit to your need, fit to your type of development, fit to your type of how do you executing this project, right? This is a bit different from the project management methodologies. We are talking about what type of artifacts we are going to create to make sure we have executed that process in terms of gaining the optimum quality throughout the product. And that's how we normally align ourselves for this quality management framework. Now, every organizations within North America and Caribbean region, normally above CMM level 3, have implemented at least one or two ISO standard, have a complete good guidelines or a templatization prepared from themselves, be it a car manufacturing, be it a software management company, be it a software consulting firm, be it an educational institution like university or something like that, right? So there we normally build a quality management framework and which we adhere to it. And there are internal quality department which keep visiting these rule books and making sure everybody complied as such for all these activities. And that's why you normally get internal quality audit team, which is kind of part and parcel of the whole quality framework we have created within our organization. Now here, plan quality management talks about all such templatization, all such adoption to a given framework, and then build these quality management processes for our project execution. In the second column, the column E, that is specifically reserved for, oh, come on, executing process group, I do manage quality. So what do you mean by manage quality? I do manage quality in terms of conformance, non-conformance. Our task list, activity list should be in terms of how do we build the product, project, support solution with the maximum quality as disciplined in the organizational quality policy, and also do the checks and balance and the artifact creation. Like once you develop, you normally send the status or update the status to somebody so that the automated management system knows this task activity have been progressed so much. And this is kind of status reporting I'm talking about within the managed quality framework. There could be some, good discipline in terms of gaining some specific benchmark for quality. Like you need to develop a software code with some standardized guidelines. You need to develop some parts of your products with some standard guidelines in terms of composition of metal, in terms of shape, and definite clarity on certain what you can say molds or sharpening edge and all those things, or sharpening paint artwork in an auto ancillary creation unit, and so on and so forth. So I have to basically make myself product, project, solution, services to an optimum quality with the least possible cost available to me. And this is what I do within managed quality discipline framework of a given organization. And then I need to keep controlling quality. I do review quality on almost hour, if not every day. So what I do, how much I have spent in terms of cost, how much I have incurred in terms of cost as of today. If I go at this rate, how much cost I'm planning to, incur throughout our, last phase. And here the cost comprise of the schedule, quality, and cost, that golden triangle we normally talk about. So control quality is all about balancing that triangle with the best possible efficiency efficacy, and best possible quality at the least possible cost within the least possible schedule. And that's the kind of progression we apply to a given project management execution throughout our day, throughout our project life cycle. Does that make sense to you? Anybody have any questions in project quality management?
So previously they used to have a triangle with quality, scope, and what do you call, schedule, budget, and all.
Sir, scope in my thought process,
Hmm.
scope does include work item plus a bit of scheduling. But yes, you're right. It's not change. It's the same thing. Some project managers take scope, schedule, and cost as a triangle. Some might say quality is a part of triangle. But you can say, okay, even if you take scope, schedule, and cost as a triangle, quality is the outcome of it. Do you agree, sir?
Yeah, correct, correct.
So,
Quality is the center part of that, the whole triangle. Yeah.
yes, sir. So you can always, take it as a scope, schedule, cost as a triangle, and quality as an outcome to it. So, and you can't compromise quality because that's an organizational discipline or a policy we have adopted. So for that matter, we need to gamble in between scope, schedule, and cost. Okay, scope is basically number of tasks or the work item to be executed. Schedule is basically within the number of days I need to complete that work item, and the cost is basically within the least possible resources. Resources means man, material, machine. Okay, so here I want to save my spending and increase my efficiency day by day, and that's what I do in case of control cost as well as control quality. Does that make sense to you, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, you can definitely answer like tell me about the golden triangle. You can explain the interviewer as a scope, schedule, and cost. That can be our basic thought process of a management, and then quality as an outcome to it. And that's why we manage that triangle. We balance that triangle throughout our project life cycle. And for that, now the next one of the most important knowledge area, the 9th chapter in my project PM book is basically project resource management knowledge area. Here I have total 6 processes, 2 in the planning, 3 in the 3 in the executing, and 1 in the monitoring and controlling process. Okay, just before that, manage quality have lots of interview questions like the typical question is, how do you manage quality in your project? So the answer should be as per the organizational policies and procedure and to my best experiences. Okay, now what does this mean? I do follow the organizational discipline, and on top of that, I use my experience really to build that artwork, to build that development support services solution as required or as planned in my SOW or project charter. Okay, but all in all, this is really a management question when you ask about how do you manage quality. Okay, so you need to write down the script according to your thought processes, but please do work around in terms of do think around how do you manage a quality in your real life, in your project as well. And here I need to specifically mention the organizational policy book, because the adoption to the CMA, ISO, and the other policy framework, and the quality policy manual, quality policy adoptions, disciplines we actually accepted within my organization. And that's how I do manage quality throughout my project. Okay, then within the resource management, there are normally good questions in terms of how do you estimate activity. Okay, we'll come to that. Let's try to understand what all these processes means in terms of actual project management. So we normally start with planning resource management. So how do you acquire resources? That will be my first initiation. Normally, in a given scenario, you might have a resource manager assigned to a given project, which normally takes care of new resources, enrollment, new resources, inducing to the given project. Okay, then there are something called of a quality check for a given resources or a familiarization to that resources. When a resource join, you normally, as a project manager, weight that resources. You normally try to understand the resource from a perspective of how we can work together. The next thing are the skills in level with what I was looking for. Normally, there are 60-70% deviation from what you actually need and what you got. And there is always a shortfall because of the cost factor of it. You might want a 5-year-old experienced resource in Java, you might get 3-year-old experienced resource in Java. And then you need to work with this scenario. So like that, we need to plan resource management activities ahead of time. And then whatever schedule or a project plan I get, I estimate the activity depending upon the resources. So when I say Ravindra is going to develop product X within the 6 hours, but if Keshav joins instead of Ravindra because Ravindra is absent on leave, some health challenges and blah blah things. Now I need to understand this Keshav resource, how much time will it take? Let's think it from a tools perspective. I'm working with a laptop with the 3 processors, 3 GB RAM and all those things. If I can get an 8-core processor laptop with 16 GB RAM, my work get executed effectively quicker, right? But is it always a possibility that you might get new laptops every time you start a project? No. So for that matters, we need to understand the budgeting factor of it, the cost factor of it as well. So that's why estimate activity resources do include estimation to activity with the conjunction with resource. So the resource in terms of man, material, machine, man being the human resource who is actually doing the work, machine being the machine used to develop that resource. So it can be laptop, desktop, a lathe machine, robot, and all those scenarios. And material is basically the raw material. So raw material is basically the integrated development suits in our software, the iron parts in the auto ancillary, or depending upon the work you do, the project you do, all these man, material, machine, their estimate activity resources is basically an activity where I rescan, revalidate my schedule based on the resource availability. And that's why again the project management is an artwork due to these flexibility changes which we normally incur every day in our life. Believe me, if you drive from house to work and work to house every day, even each of these experience of driving from home to work is a different. Means there's a bit of difference. It's not like drastically different, but like 2%, 5%, 10% different. And similar way, all these resources which are got in, induced in your project, they do work differently each day. You might have a different resources each day or a group of different resources working on a given project each day. And that's what the project management artwork is all about. And that's what it makes really challenging. And that's why most of the project manager enjoy doing project work because of such changing, changing scenario every day, every hour of the project. Okay. In the executing process group, acquire resources. What do you mean by it should be acquire, not acquired? Okay, acquire resources basically continuously gaining or try to gain resources from the recruitment management team so that more the resources, the task will get executed earlier with more hands at your help and so on. So that's why acquire resources is one of the most prominent activity. In most of the scenario, acquire resources talks about proactively acquiring resources, because let's talk in terms of human resources. If you want a Java developer with a 5-year experience, you need to go to resource manager almost 2 weeks in advance. In some company, there are more time. In some organizations, whenever you apply for a new resources, the resource manager might give it to you after a week or 2 weeks time, depending upon the organizational policy and processes, or the new resource induction even to the organizations. So new employee joining to the employer. And that way, acquire resources is a proactive planning task. It's not a ribbon cutting ceremony. And so that you plan your project in such a way that whatever resources you are acquiring, they are proactively acquired to make sure they are there on the project, up and running at the time you want. And this is the jugglery. This is the art of the project management. Then even develop team. In case of some shortfall of a new resources or older resources, I might hire a trainer, or I might use an approach called train the trainer and so on and so forth, so that the resources can be brought up to a skill level, what is required by the project. And that's what the develop team is all about. And manage team is all about maintaining the efficiency, efficacy, and the quality of development of this project, solution, support services. And then controlling resources is all the above 9.3, 9.4, and 9.5, where I'm trying to understand how do I control the project progress within the resources available to me. And that's the major artwork we're talking about. So if an interviewer asks you, what do you mean by controlling resources? Please do mention resources mean man, material, machinery. So controlling the resources means you need to actually get the best possible resources, utilize the best possible resources in the best efficient way, and not to let the resources go as well. Because if you work, if you normally execute your project in an autocratic way, mostly resources run away from you because they feel this is your work rather than their work. In the PMI, PMP thought process, there's another good concept which have basically induced from, I think, fourth PM book, where the thought process of buying the work or accepting the work rather than assigning the work thought process came into play. So what does this mean? If Ravindra is resources, he knows his skill set, and whenever I'm planning, he asks for a task to be done by him. And that's the kind of encouragement we do whenever we assign tasks to resources. How does it differ? It basically, the resource gives maximum efficiency, maximum concentration on completing the task at time if he asks for the task by himself. And that's the processes we we encourage within our project management thought process. And that's it. I control the resources. And that's why when somebody asks for a task, we know, yes, that's the best positive thing we can do in terms of assigning the task. Well, we are assigning a task in our project management calendar, but this is why the resource have asked for me, and that's how I'm doing it, rather than I'm throwing a task to be done by a resources Ravindra. And then he might do it, not wholeheartedly, but kind of get the task completed and move on the life kind of scenario. Okay, so this is the way we normally improve throughout our artwork, throughout our control resources process group. Does anybody have any question at this moment in terms of the knowledge area which we have covered so far? Any confusion? Now this is what we call core knowledge area, in terms of if you know these first 6 knowledge area, it's really can make you a good project manager. Now, how do you excel in project management? The rest knowledge, other 4 knowledge area talks about bringing excellence to the management. The first one is project communication management. Now here, these are the real hard facts we learned throughout the evolution of the management thought processes. So how do you implement project communication management within team, within your organization, and within the group of stakeholders? And how do you basically scale up these communication depending upon the number of channel requirement, depending upon formal, informal communication, and so on and so forth. So here PMI talks about in-depth communication knowledge, knowledgement plans, and achieving the communication most effective way. So in 10.1, we talk about plan communication management in terms of what type of tools are we going to use. Should we use email? Should we use Zoom? Should we use Google Meet? Should we use Microsoft Teams? And the whole 9 out of it. So we talked about the tools, the procedures, the policies, and the frequency of communication in plan communication management. In managed communication, I normally build a list of stakeholders where I normally include all these details of the criticality of a given stakeholder, his position within the hierarchical team of the projects, his say in the overall requirement or the scenario change. If he or she is a product owner, he's one of the most critical resources. if or he or she is an executive working at a client place, he can be at a basically a lower priority in terms of stakeholder management. So in the stakeholder management, I do manage the communication in that scenario, in that in-depth communication way. So for a given stakeholder who is really critical in terms of sanction, in terms of approving, I normally talk to him on a daily basis for checking out his satisfaction, his compliance to your thought process, and you might change your thought process, you might change your policies and procedure for that resources if he or feel satisfied, feel more appreciated one way or the other. And that's why the managed communication is important factor in terms of getting the project executed in the least possible obstacles way. And then monitor communication. Monitor communication, you might get asked question like, how do you monitor communication? And this is again a personal approach or an artwork for a project communication engagement. You can normally explain in a standard best practices way. I do track of stakeholder with a separate list, one for me specifically, one for the complete, archival or disposal for the project documentation. But the stakeholder list, which I normally have, which includes the stakeholders criticality, best time to call, best tool to call, best way to meet, best way to share good information, bad information, and the whole 9 hours of it. So how to communicate with a given stakeholder is what I maintain as in separate notes, so that whenever I want to talk to somebody, I normally refer to my communication plan, I normally refer to my communication priorities, communication discipline documents, whatever you want to call it. And then I normally start communication in the best possible disciplined manner. And even I update the communication discipline document now and often whenever I speak to somebody, when I communicate with somebody, might be through SMS, WhatsApp, email, or online video chat and whatnot. I normally try to learn about such person in more depth, and I normally greet them or get clubbed with such person even informally. And I normally, wish them on their birthdays, their anniversaries, and so on and so forth for their near and dear ones. Okay, depending upon the time availability, I like to do these things in the early morning, at the evening time, or at the weekend time as well, depending on your plan as an artwork. And this is what the monitor communication talks about. And on top of that, PMI, PMP have introduced a new thought process. Basically, it's adopted from North American military, US military basically, and they say dissemination of information. Dissemination means give it what they are necessarily need to get the work done, not anything extra. This is, like that don't learn, don't tell kind of policies, but that's a bit different. Let's talk about dissemination of information. Give the information whatever he or she needs to complete the task. The bird's eye view is a thought processes in terms of design, but in actual coding, give them what the developers needs to be developed. Give them, give the executive whatever he or she needs in terms of information for the task completion. That's all, and not more. Even with the stakeholders, they want to restrict the information to the bare minimum, to the least possible information dispersal, and that's why they call information dissemination. This thought process basically talks about reducing the communication, burden on the given stakeholder up to a greatest level, and that's why even the stakeholders are happy with you, and they might call you as a man of or woman of a least word, and more of a clear thoughts as well. And that's how we keep building our rapport with all the stakeholders. And these all four now knowledge management area talks about excellence in management. That's why the first one is project communication management. I believe you understood why they call it as an what I can say, excellence in the project management. Okay, could you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and you can relate this thing to your actual experience as well. The more you talk, the more you make a mistake, and this happens with me most of the time. So the least you talk, you can get the thing across quite clearly. You can communicate quite clearly. I'm a talkative person. That's my manufacturing defect, I can say. But still, I know what I have to control. I know what I have to, how I can excel, right? So that's why I need to keep appraising the best practices, keep getting better day by day. And that's what the evolution is all about. So all these four knowledge management area talks about evolutionary project management. Okay. Do you want me to stop here? Because now the risk management is another, big chunk of understanding. And here maximum questions comes, interview questions. So this is really crucial project management knowledge area, which we'll basically discuss in our next session. But yes, today we have discussed the basic, first 10 knowledge area, first, sorry, not 10, pardon me, first 7 knowledge area. We will repeat project communication management next time, and then we'll basically discuss the risk management, project procurement, and a stakeholder management in our next session, where we'll try to understand how we can basically excel within these things. And on top of that, what I would really suggest is basically, let's take a break on Saturday's session. Let's meet on Tuesday again. This is just to revise yourself and prepare some additional question in terms of what type of revision do I need, means in terms of each and every particular of your participant, like Sridhar Potri sir can basically have its own aspiration, own needs in terms of the current scenario. Sai sir can have his own needs or questions, and then we can basically discuss on that. I believe there were 2 more participants, right? They left, I believe. Okay, no problem. So
Yes.
here, yeah, no problem. But that's their priority, I believe. So here, what we are trying to do, we are trying to revise the knowledge area in a kind of senior management perspectives, more or less. And there, we're trying to understand how I can utilize this knowledge management area for the interviewing clearance perspective. And then we keep learning, we keep appraising the best practices, one step at a time whenever we join the job, whenever we start working for a given organizations, as per their quality policy group, as per the actual project on the ground. Does that make sense to you, sir?
Yeah, so let me tell you one important thing.
Please, sir.
In the last 10 years, I have been thinking, oh, this PMP is all not so important. It's
I know.
only
I
the
understand.
it's only the iterative agile scrum is the golden path. But believe it or not, in last 1 week, I am seeing so many jobs just on the PMI, PMP kind of things.
Right.
And a lot of companies, including Google, okay, is looking, including Google, Apple, they are all looking for PMI as a golden standard even now. So
Yes, definitely. It's a part
many
of us.
jobs are there. I'm really surprised. I really was focusing
Sir,
more
let me
on
tell
the
you,
agile
let me
side.
tell you, forget about the project management. Even in our real life, we look for a golden triangle. Let's think of a project like you want to take your family to a fancy restaurant for a dinner or for a lunch. Now, you need to understand the golden triangle from that perspective. Is it near to house? Can I travel effectively? Or it's pocket heavy on gas, because gas prices are considerably high as of now in North America. Is it good in terms of even hotels payment? Is it a buffet? Is it a sit and eat kind of dinner? These restaurants are more costly than a buffet type. If you choose the buffet, then how about the my kids level of intake, or will they enjoy the buffet? Because kids tend to kind of don't know what to eat at the right time. They might just go ahead with the junky food, and as a normal thought process. So all these quality triangle we think about normally whenever we plan any task, and that's our Indian or human nature. In Indians, we are jugadu by birth. Believe me, we are the best statistician. We are the best jugadu people. We are not good at management. We are best at utilizing the things which are given to us in the best possible way. And I really proud on saying that. Means we had a good discussion when I was in North America with quite a good number of dignitaries on this basis. Like even something like Grady Butch, my VP of Enterprise Rent a Car, She used to talk to me on an informal basis. My first project manager, when I was assistant project manager in North America, on how Indians are in terms of management and in terms of the ancillary thought process of the management. And we can't really ignore these jugadu pravrutti, this jugadu or statistician attitude whenever we try to get things done in the most balanced way within this quality triangle. That's what, what I really say is PMP, PMI is a life enhancing thought process. If you can agree with me, well, you can disagree also. It's again, basically, you can improve your life if you go by these thought processes. And that's why these are what you can say, matured management processes can be applied to you, even your daily life.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me, sir?
Yeah. In fact, even if you are going to get a job as an agile or scrum master or something, even there, the underlying philosophy of everything like risk management, scope management, schedule management, every single area from here is going to be applied indirectly. Maybe
Right.
it won't be called out like this, but it is definitely getting applied.
Yes, yes, sir. Very rightly said. Very rightly said, sir. Yeah, so yes, that's really great discussion today, and I'm really happy. Like we are conquering on many thought processes. Let's do the thing. Let's review these things, and let's try to understand how we can utilize this knowledge in our best possible way. Okay. In addition to that,